Windmill Wisdom would like to thank the Texas Cattle Feeders Association in Amarillo, Texas, for allowing us to shoot this episode on location at their headquarters.
Okay, we're back. Had a really good first segment talking about risk protection. I've got Robby Kirkland, Rachel Myers, and Tiffany Lashmet here today to join us. Let's go ahead and let's get right back into this. When we picked up a while ago, we had been talking about folks' risk aversion. I think when we're looking at risk, just the word itself covers a lot of things. But when we get into taking that to the standpoint of how can we take these advisors. Tiffany mentioned getting trusted advisors that help you in these things. And we've had in some of our other Windmill Wisdom episodes, one thing that has always come to bear that is a central truth that we keep coming back to is deal with people that are dealing with these things over and over again. Benefit from the mistakes that other people made so that you don't make them again. I'd like to give y'all a chance to talk about a few of the things, pitfalls that y'all might see that you see people falling off into sometimes in risk. And I'll pick up with you, Rachel.
Sure. I think, and especially directed towards the landowner themselves, a lot of times in our crop relationships, we've got, landlord-tenant relationships. A lot of the tenants will be handling the risk management for that landlord. I have some that say, get them the cheapest thing that's available. I have others that say, do whatever I'm doing. Well, that's great, but I think I'd like to encourage landowners themselves to possibly, talk with your tenant, absolutely, but to also don't ever feel, hesitant in reaching out to the crop insurance agent. From my standpoint, I love those phone calls. I welcome them. I would love to talk through what they are seeking in their level of protection, and not to cut their, tenant out whatsoever, but for those landlords to also step up and play an active role in that, because they have a lot at risk as well. That may be an investment property. It may be their kid's inheritance. There's a lot of things that are behind that land. It may be a 100-year-old farm that's been in the family. Right. There's so much to it. And so I think that would be, that's an area that I do see some weakness that possibly we're not meeting all of the risk management needs there just due to that lack of relationship.
Communication. That's
Absolutely.
What we always come back to here.
So many people are afraid to call. They're like, I don't want to waste your time. Well,
right.
That's what I get paid for. Like, please waste my time.
Right.
It makes me better. I like people. I like that relationship, and I want people to feel that comfort level, just like you're saying, with their advisors, whoever that is, that they can pick up the phone and call. A lot of times, if you'll just call and ask the question, it is so much better. I can do a lot better job keeping you out of hot water if I know what you're up to. So
well, and I know you're an agent that does have meetings. You encourage and have meetings for your producers, but it is hard to get those landowners sometimes to come to those meetings.
Some of them live in California and Missouri and all different places, and so we try our best to maintain those relationships if we have them. But a lot of times, I've never met these people, never talked to them, because so much is being handled through their tenants. So
true. Yeah. Robby, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and something Rachel said that kind of stuck out is I get the calls a lot about talking about risk and talking about what we're doing, and that's what they say. Well, what are you doing? And so that's what I said. Well, you can't necessarily gauge what I'm doing versus because everybody's got, like we said, a different risk tolerance, and mine may be moving. I mean, I've watched the market a lot closer because that's part of my business, and so you have these guys that have ranches and their business is producing beef cattle, and so they're not sitting there watching the futures market, and so I may make a move, on kind of a spur of the moment because I see something happening in the market or whatnot. So I said, you can't just do what I'm doing. I mean, I understand. I'll tell you what I'm doing and give you the pros and cons of what risk management I'm taking, but don't just lay it in my lap and say, here, do what you're doing. So
it's a lot more of a snowflake scenario than it is a cookie cutter.
Yeah.
I mean, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, it is, and I think people just they either need to have a plan or don't need to have a plan. I mean, ultimately, you got to decide: am I going to be a risk manager or am I not? And if I am, then I need to be consistent with my plan and have a plan, and then stick with it because trying to hit highs and lows, we always know in the markets, whether it's crops or cattle or whatever it is, you just you're just going to be lucky if you catch that high.
Well, somebody said during the break, and I wanted to bring it back up because I thought it was a good point, but there's always folks that think that they're going to be the one that beats the system. The one that always can game the system. And I'm sure there's guys out there that are smart enough at times that they do benefit. But if your real goal is risk protection, I think that's the thing. That's who we're probably talking to more today, is how do I protect myself against a big mistake that could put me out of business, like you said, so I can stay in the game and protect the legacy that I'm trying to hold on to here. So, that opens up another topic, and that's one thing that I think Tiffany's going to dig into a little bit more. But when we talk about risk protection, a big issue that's come up over the last few years has been liability. If you own land, what are liability issues that you need to be aware of? We're going to talk about a lot of different things today, but just touching on the surface, there's new things that have come up in the last few years because of some of the practices that are being implemented on the farm and on the ranch. So I'm going to jump over to Tiffany and let her talk about this for a little bit.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different when we're looking at risk management from a liability perspective, because we're focused a lot on if somebody comes on your property for whatever reason and gets injured, what could you have done to protect yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not something maybe every year you're thinking about. You're thinking about crop insurance. You may not think about this all the time. But I can give something that's a little bit more of an absolute maybe than we've given, and that is every landowner needs liability insurance, period. I don't think there are exceptions to that. I just think that they do. I also will go a step further and say every agricultural tenant needs liability insurance.
Absolutely.
And the fact of it is, look, something can happen, and it can happen in an instant, and you never thought of it. It never occurred to you there could be a problem. And the next thing you know, you're facing this multi-million-dollar lawsuit, and without that insurance, you're in big trouble. And so having liability insurance in place, I think, is important. I always like to preach this a little bit. There's sort of two benefits to insurance from the liability perspective. We're all pretty familiar with, we have that coverage level where they'll pay a claim up to that amount. But the second thing that it provides you is a defense, right? So if something happens on my ranch tomorrow, somebody gets injured, my first phone call is to my insurance agent. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to hire me a lawyer on their dime to defend me. That's worth a lot. And so I think that's something that we can easily overlook. And another thing I'll say on liability insurance, the liability portion is generally not that expensive.
Right.
And you think about, well, we got our farm and ranch policy, and gosh, it cost this much. Well, most of that was your property coverage, right? So your barn, your house, etc. If you look just at pricing the liability portion or increasing liability, from one to the next, generally not that expensive. I mean, we've got a place, and again, everywhere's different, but we've got a place that we leased that was about 100 acres, and we had, I think, $500,000 in liability coverage. It costs $65 a year. I mean, for crying out loud, it's crazy to roll the dice on if something were to happen there, and not spend $65. And so just having that liability insurance, I think, is really important. And again, we'll go back to having good advisors. You need to have a good insurance agent who understands your operation, understands everything you're doing, to make sure and help you analyze that you have the right level of coverage and the right scope of coverage that covers everything you've got going on.
In a way, it's a lot like that same calculation you're trying to do for your risk tolerance. I mean, at the same time, what is my exposure, here with this, and what could I handle, and what kind of deductible? Because I know you think with liability there's no deductible, but actually there kind of is. You base that coverage limit. I can remember back from my insurance days, echoing what you said about the cost of liability. I could never get people interested in talking about their liability insurance, it seemed like, but really it was the best bargain that we had of everything that we were selling.
For sure, yeah.
And I think you're seeing more people buy it now for some other whatever reasons, but I think echo her statements. Everybody needs, if you own an asset, you need liability coverage for that asset, especially something like land.
Yeah, well, the fact is, look, if somebody gets injured on that land, it may very well not be the landowner's fault. They may get the case dismissed. The court says there was no liability, but do you know what it costs to hire a lawyer and get a case dismissed? A lot more than $65, right? And so, it's just good money up front when you're looking at, risk level. Spend the money on the insurance if anything ever does happen. Because the other thing is, if there's an accident or an injury on the property, they're going to sue the landowner. Absolutely. Whether you have a tenant, whether you aren't there, whether you live in California and the land's in Texas, that landowner's going to be named in that lawsuit 9 times out of 10. And so again, having that insurance in place to help deal with that is really important.
And that's something that's coming up more and more, because I can take a pin in just about any county drop a pin and look at the land ownership in a 7 to 8 mile radius, and you're probably going to cover 20 states in most examples because of what's happened over the last few years with ag. I mean, kids have gone off, took jobs in other other states, other areas in the metropolitan areas, and so we've got a lot of folks that have interest in our land in our backyard that don't even live in Texas and don't even understand Texas liability. And vice versa. I mean, you may own land in other states, and you need to have insurance agents and people that are helping you that understand the laws of the state in which you live.
That's right, and the other point I was going to make ties into that, talking about the laws in Texas. There are a handful of limited liability statutes here in Texas that apply to Texas landowners. And so there's kind of three that I talk about. One's the recreational use statute, there's the Texas Agri Tourism Act, and there's the Texas Farm Animal Liability Act. Each of those give limited liability protection by statute to landowners in certain circumstances. So the recreational use statute applies if somebody comes on your property and they get injured doing a recreational activity. Hunting's the big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've got hunters, you better read up on that recreational use statute. It's free limited liability if you meet the requirements. The Agri Tourism Act, same deal. It applies to ranch land, farmland, if you've got folks coming on doing a recreational or educational purpose. So, if Robby's going to bring people out for some sort of field day at the feed yard and he's got people coming, that recreational use statute might provide, the Agri-Tourism Act might provide some protection there from that educational purpose. The Farm Animal Liability Act offers some protection if the injury is caused by a risk inherent to a farm animal activity. So, how many times have we seen we put a kid on a horse, send him down the road, horse bucks kid off? That statute can come into play there and can dismiss a case if it's an inherent risk. And so, educating yourselves on what statutes exist, what you need to do to make sure those apply, can be a cheap, almost free way to really help limit your liability as well.
That's really good advice, and I think it's just knowing how to get to some of this. Again, a point that we made in our other Windmill episode that you were on. Tiffany's an excellent resource for information. Going through the extension office and using what AgriLife has put out there. She's got some publications. We haven't mentioned that on this episode, but she put out a landowners publication that talks a lot about. She's got several sections in it, but it's an awesome resource, and you can get that. Didn't you say it's posted? Go ahead and tell us where that's.
Yeah,
at.
You can download the PDF. My blog is the Texas Ag Law blog. There's a PDF of that. It's called Owning Your Piece of Texas, and there's a whole chapter in there on landowner liability, and talks about those different statutes and how they apply, as well as different things: fence law, water law, etc.
And going back to that, I was thinking about that when you mentioned the agritourism, because that's becoming a bigger deal. I think it's important to get people out on the farm. I love the fact that our state has put in some protection for that, because educating this next generation of youngsters about where things come from, where the beef that's on my plate comes from, where the milk that we drink comes from, where the food that we grow for clothing and all those things, because it's such a big issue to me, having grown up in ag. I was a agricultural student and went through FFA and 4-H, but also got my college paid for through FFA scholarship. But I feel like each one of us that has worked in agriculture needs to be ambassadors for agriculture as we go out. And Robby, I know y'all do a lot around that. I see some of the stuff that y'all post. Y'all bring people out to the feed yard.
We do. Of course, we do a lot on social media. Mm-hmm. My wife kind of runs that campaign, and then we have kind of open door, and we kind of were challenged about 5 years ago to kind of tell our story, and we just, we hear that if we don't tell our story and it's not the right story, somebody else can tell the story for us. And so we've been an open door. We have youth events out there. We have youth tours. We have, being right there close to Interstate 40, we have people that come through Vega and they want to see a feed yard. And so we've opened our doors to letting some of those people come on and see what we do. And we know we do things right, and we work hard at what we do, and there's nothing to hide. And so we're open for people to come out and see what's going on at a family-owned feed yard.
And I wanted to bring that up because I know Rachel's got a background too, where she was involved in things earlier in her career, where you were working for was it the Wheat Growers Association?
I did. I handled communications and public relations. I did some political work for them as well through various farm bills and things like that. And Robby's absolutely right. And I grew up in agriculture. I was raised on a family farm and ranch that's been in our family since the mid 1800s, and so proud of that heritage. And I think all of us are so proud of our upbringing and know, you know, what truly happens in agriculture and on the farm, and want to raise our children the same way. But we are terrible at getting out and sharing our story, and I think we've become so much better at that. But it is exactly that, and I want people to know that if you have questions, while I encourage you to look on social media and read about agriculture, ask someone who's really in the business, because all of us will tell you our story and, you know, how we came to be and the love for the animals that we have, that we all raise. So
Well, and that's a good. We've got to take another break, but that's exactly why I like bringing people together to do these Windmill Wisdom episodes. So when we come back, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to talk about these issues a little bit more, and we'll be back in just a minute. Thanks.
Windmill Wisdom would like to thank Rachel Myers, owner and operator of Myers Crop Insurance Agency. Myers Crop Insurance Agency helps farmers and ranchers choose the risk management products that fit their needs. Not only do they work with just farmland, they also work with pasture, forest, and rangeland. They serve the Texas Panhandle as well as parts of New Mexico and Oklahoma. To contact Rachel, you can go to the mequicklink.com/Rachel Myers, or you can click the ME Quick link in the video description below.
At M. Edwards Realtors, we believe in the right mix of old-fashioned values combined with cutting-edge technology. We know presentation is paramount, and we are serious about high-quality video, photography, and maps. We also know that information is key, and will work hard to help you make informed decisions throughout your transaction. Not only are we your real estate professional, our team has experience in farming, ranching, ag lending, conservation, and risk management. Whether selling or buying, let our experience go to work for you.
We will be back next week with our final segment of this episode. So, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you can receive notifications on when the final segment of this episode of Windmill Wisdom will air.